energy.
Welcome to the Activated Authors Podcast, a show where we distill the core principles of what it takes to become a happy, healthy, and productive author, no matter what stage of the journey you're at. I'm your host, Daniel Wilcox. I'm an international best-selling author, as well as an author coach, speaker, and creative entrepreneur. But most importantly, I'm a lifelong student of all things productivity, psychology, and human behavior. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Without further ado, let's dive in. What is up, Activators, and welcome back to another episode of the Activated Authors Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wilcox, and here with me every single week is...
Samantha Frost, or Sam Frost, because Samantha is my father.
Interesting. I did not know that about you. I am learning something new every week.
There you go.
How's it going, Sam?
Horribly. How's it going with you?
Hot. Just so hot. It's come out of nowhere again. And you'll probably hear little one chattering away in the background because I'm also back on dad duty. But you know, needs must. But yeah, just I'm at that point of like aggressive hot, like just because I don't want to like carp on about the weather every single week on this thing, but
it's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. I'm on the first floor of a house, like masonette style thing. So all the heat rises and I have all the windows open. I've got a fan blowing. I've got all this stuff going on and just, it doesn't dispel. So I can go outside in the sun and it is cooler than it currently is in my house. So people watching on YouTube, enjoy. And what about you, Sam?
Well, I mean, I'm currently sat on the top floor of my house and it is Satan's butthole temperature.
Satan's butthole temperature. You heard it here, folks. Satan's butthole.
Yeah. And I am currently very not well, although better than I have been.
Yeah. Had we recorded this yesterday, he might not have been your chirpy self.
Had you recorded this yesterday, you'd have probably had to do it by yourself. Yeah.
I've done so many of those.
Yeah. So you'd be excellent.
Thanks, Bailey. Just said I'm doing good. What you well, I assume probably not working on much at the minute, given that, you know, you've been very, very ill for the last like week.
I've been working on getting through all of the seasons of Brooklyn Nine-Nine while being unable to really move from the sofa. I'm also currently working on keeping a demon dog at bay because I'm looking after my mum's dog for a week, which started today. Done a little bit of vlogging. I've done a little bit of research on the Roe v. Wade situation. But yeah, not much, to be honest. Just kind of been trying to stay breathing, which has been harder. It's been harder than I would like this week. How about you? What have you been working on?
I finished my 68th book.
Oh, okay, so nothing big. That's insane. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, worked to deadline, pumped out the words, started to put in a plan. I will say, so something, there's what? The next one, yeah, I feel...
I just realised that you're going to finish ghostwriting on 69, and
yes,
it's made me so happy.
Yeah, so I have finished this book, which is much books. And then outside of that, because there's really nothing much more to say other than I've been writing and working on that and finished that today, so I'm very, very happy with that. I had my mind blown this week by none other than our own Meg in our Activated Authors community when she was on the Rebel Author podcast last week, in which just blew my mind. Like there are a few things in life that you kind of, it happens every now and then. There are those things you just take as a given that you don't think about, that you just do. So in this example, every year I plan my year in quarters because 3 months, quarters, it feels good. It comes over from like the corporate stuff I've done before. It makes sense. Like divide 12 months into 3 months each. That's cool. Like you can chip away, you can do your goals each year. The last couple of years, I've bounced that backwards and forwards between starting my business goals in January, because obviously New Year, and then there's a financial New Year in April. So this year I moved my main goals in line with financial goals and was just like, ignore January. That technically means nothing. All of my stuff starts in April, goes for the year forward. And then listening to some stuff that Meg said on that podcast, in which she basically described about how she divides her year into what she calls septiles, which are essentially 7 chunks. And the reason she does 7 chunks is because there are essentially 6 periods throughout the year in which you have half terms in the UK, at least for kids, and then the summer. 6 + 1 is 7, just for people who haven't worked that. And within these septiles, you basically plan them for the half terms. And one of the things I have been struggling with is that within those quarters, I always struggle to align for half terms, and for whatever reason, they just don't fit in with the plan, and they suddenly take me by surprise. Suddenly I've got like a week, 2 weeks in which I can't do work, summer, all that kind of stuff. And this takes that into account. Like at the end of each septile is the half term. So I'm now in a period in which I can plan my year into 7 chunks. I've already marked out the calendar for the, you know, what this year is, still keeping it in line with starting around April, give or take a few things. But it also means that I have more areas of review as well. And what I've discovered about myself is I don't like to plan too far in advance, because lots of things change in 3 months. So these are like 6 to 8 week periods in which, when that period comes, I've got a list of projects I want to get on with. By the time that period starts, I can point at one and go, that's what I'm doing this period. And it just struck home with me. It just worked amazingly, and it is my new system. So that happened this week.
Yeah, I've never heard of the word septile.
I don't know that it's technically accurate. Although it kind of makes sense. You have quartiles.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, never heard of it before. And honestly, at this point, I've heard it more than I think any other word ever in my life this week.
Just I've been raving and jumping about like septiles, make septiles.
Yeah.
What's something you've enjoyed this week?
Oh God.
Nothing.
Night nurse.
God bless medicine.
Modern medicine.
Because
Because like it's been I can't. It's been
I'm so sorry, Sam.
It remains to be really rough. But at least with that, I'm getting a little bit of relief and actually managing to sleep at night.
We'll say you've been on, well, you're on the up now, fingers crossed, without jinxing stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, honestly, Brooklyn Nine-Nine has kept me sane, and Night Nurse has kept me alive. What about you? What have you enjoyed?
The finale of Stranger Things for me.
Oh, nice.
Like episode 8 is like an hour and a half, and the final episode is like 2 hours 40 minutes, so it's like a whole film in itself, and it just delivered. I enjoyed that whole season from start to finish. I said to you earlier this week, it was one of those that I enjoyed, but I definitely got the most out of season 1. And then season 2 and 3 were good, but like it was kind of, I was drifting away a bit, and then season 4 just pulled me right back in, because it's just masterfully pulled all the elements together in a way that.
Same writer for season 4.
What's that? Sorry. What did you say? Huh?
My ears are blocked. I'm so sorry. I said, is it the same writer? So like,
yes,
for the 4 seasons.
Yeah, it's the Duffer Brothers.
Okay.
Yeah, the Duffer Brothers.
Unfortunate.
But yeah, so that's what I've enjoyed this week, and then obviously we're getting down to the point where I have one ghostwritten book to go. I commissioned book 69. I commissioned a cover yesterday for a potential new project, which I'm so excited for. And yeah, take it from there.
Nice.
Our weekly win this week is brought to you by none other than Emmy, who says that she began a seriously delicious 180-degree writing project as a palate cleanser, and have dedicated the month of July to writing and leveling up her craft, which I love, actually taking a bit of time out to do something a bit different and to work. What?
I'm sorry. 2 dogs just entered my room humping.
Oh,
they moved.
That's impressive more than anything else.
Yeah.
That's like a freaky little pug conga. This is madness this week. This is what we get for overheating in the UK, also being on parental responsibilities, and also being ill. So apologies for the frivolities, people. Yeah,
and I'm sorry you couldn't see that, because as much as watching dogs,
I can picture in my head, it's hilarious.
Isn't everybody's thing. It was genius. Now I'm just going to remove these. I thought I'd shut my door, but they found a way in while humping, which quite frankly is just impressive. I'm going to remove them.
Okay.
Just for the poor people on YouTube, and also I imagine because they're not quiet dogs.
Yeah, I can already hear them. So are the dogs gone now?
Yes, the door is shut. They are out. No more humping. Well, no more humping here anyway.
Not presently.
No, at least I don't have to witness it. But anyway, moving on from like dog humping. who do we have this week, Dan? Who's our guest?
I am very excited about our guest this week. So our guest this week is none other than Tim Lebbon. For people unfamiliar with Tim Lebbon, he is a horror author and a author of dark fantasy. He has written a lot of intellectual property tie-ins on books such as Alien and Hellboy and Firefly. And I know you're a big Firefly fan. Firefly fan. Firefly fan. Yeah, it sounds like an amazing dessert. But yeah, so I met Tim at the ChillerCon conference I went to a couple of weeks ago in Scarborough. We hit it off right away. We're both massive Frank Turner fans. If no one's listened to Frank Turner before, check him out. He is incredible on Spotify. But yeah, I guess there's nothing else to say other than enjoy this interview with the incredible, wonderful, amazing Tim Lebbon. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by the incredible Tim Lebbon. Tim Lebbon is an award-winning New York Times-bestselling horror, thriller, and fantasy writer from a little village in South Wales. He's written over 45 novels, dozens of novellas, hundreds of short stories, as well as tie-in novels in the Alien, Predator, Hellboy, Star Wars, and Firefly universes. And his novel, The Silence, was made into a Netflix movie starring Kiernan, Shipka, and Stanley, Tucci. When not writing, Tim can be found swimming, biking, and running in triathlons, activities which found their way into his non-fiction book, Run, Walk, Crawl, Getting Fit in My Forties. Tim, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dan. Great to be here. That was a good intro. Yeah, like that one.
There's a lot of meat in there that we can dive into, and actually trying to go through that and trying to like work out what I wanted to talk about in this conversation. There are so many different directions that we can go. But I'm actually going to start on something that kind of caught my eye when you jumped on camera, which is you have a number of mugs on that radiator. What's the story behind all of those mugs?
I don't know, to be honest. I think that's my favorite.
Mr. Zombie. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And then this is a good one. So I had The Silence published in Germany.
Nice.
And the publisher, I just went all out with publicity, and it's the most beautiful limited edition book I've ever had.
Yeah.
By Bookheim Verlag. And you know, so and then the other ones, I don't know, you just collect them.
Just collect mugs. Fair enough. Why not? Everyone's got their thing. So tell my audience a little bit about yourself and, you know, kind of, I know it's kind of a lot to cover, but how you got into writing and how you kind of gotten to where you are today.
Okay. Yeah, that's
broad strokes.
It's not to cover. I'll try and do it. So I've always written since I was pre-teen, really. I mean, I've always enjoyed writing stories and telling stories. My mum got me into reading. My parents, my mum mainly, I guess, when I was really young. And pre-teens, I was reading like a book a day, and I'd help at the local library with my friend Amadin. We'd go there after school and reshelve all the books. Just always had a love of books. And then Mum gave me The Rats to read by James Herbert.
Oh, perfect.
10 or 11. She was a very liberal-minded mum, and that changed everything for me. Obviously, I went from reading Hardy Boys books to Stephen King. With nothing in the middle, because when I was a long time ago, when I was that age, it wasn't such a YA field as there is now. It was kids books and then adult books, and then through my teens, I was reading all this horror stuff and all sorts of war stories, and just started writing with more with a view to finishing stuff. And then early 20s, I started writing with a view to getting stuff published, and that happened eventually with Mesmer when I was mid to late 20s, I think, my first novel. That was mid 20s that was published.
Wow.
And just went on from there, really. Year by year, I got more stuff published. I wrote more, started making enough money to think about going full time, which I did, I think 17 years ago this year. I've been writing for a living, which is sometimes terrifying but sometimes exhilarating. It's certainly exhilarating in the way that a fairground, a roller coaster is exhilarating, I guess. Ups and downs, but more ups and downs without doubt. Still doing it and still no regrets.
Yeah, and obviously, as we said in the intro, you've got quite the backlist there, massive catalogue of Tim Lebbon books. I already want to jump back a little bit to one of the ways that you phrased something really caught me there, which was in your sort of teens, you worked mostly on finishing books. And it wasn't until you're in your 20s that you started to actually look at publishing books.
Right. Yeah.
So at that point you were writing books literally just for the joy of it, just for getting it down on paper, just for yourself at that point?
Yeah, I think it was really. I mean, there was one I remember is I read quite a few books by Colin Forbes, a thriller writer, and he'd written war stories. He wrote a great novel called Tramp in Armour, which is about a tank crew stuck behind the lines at around the time of Dunkirk. And I wrote a total rip-off of this book and finished it, but I don't remember ever thinking I could get this published. I just enjoyed telling stories and just enjoyed putting words on paper. Yeah, so through my teens, I never sent anything off for publication. It was a short story called Black Heart when I was probably 21, 22, maybe 23, that I sent off to a competition. I can't remember the name of the competition, and got a really good, sorry you didn't win, but we enjoyed the story, and from that story onwards, I thought to myself, I could try and get these published somewhere. And that's when I started looking into where you get stuff like that published. And at the time, it was small press magazines.
Yeah.
Printed at home on one of those hand printed things that the ink smells really nice. Saddle stapled at home, folded over and sent out to 30 or 40 or 100 subscribers. And that's where I got my first stories published. First published story was actually in a magazine called Psychotrope.
Nice.
Amazing little magazine. And the second one was Peeping Tom, which was a really popular small press magazine back in the day.
I'm assuming they've stopped now.
Yeah, years ago. Yeah, there's not so many of these magazines around anymore. There was a thriving small press when I started out. There were hundreds of magazines because you could just start one in your living room, basically.
Yeah.
Peeping Tom, I got paid £2.50 for my story. So my second story acceptance, I got paid for. I probably still got the check somewhere, actually, because I didn't cash it. I didn't want to cash it. I put it on the wall and thought, there's my inspiration. And sometimes still don't get paid that much more, but sometimes you do.
So how many books was it before you actually started thinking, I could make a go of this? Because you said, 17 years since you've gone full-time as an author, which is obviously like a decent stretch to be putting out stories and making money from doing what you're doing. What was the first moment in which you went, okay, I think I've got something here where I can really make a living from this?
Oh God, trying to think now. So my first few books were small press books, independent press, like people like, my first publication in the States was Nightshade Books, and they did a few of my books. And over here, I had a couple of stories, a couple of novellas with PS Publishing, Razor Blade Press, Tangent. But it was my first mass market book was The Nature of Balance with Leisure Books in the States, and I think that was about 2001 or 2002. And they didn't pay an awful lot of money, but it was, you were selling tens of thousands instead of hundreds of books at a time. So the potential hit me there. And I think it was probably I got to deal with Bantam writing fantasy books in the States. And it was before the first one of those books was out that I decided to make the leap. I was a surveyor in my previous life, so I was good at statistics, and actually I was terrible at statistics, but I managed to bluff my way through the job. So I created a sort of a spreadsheet for my wife saying, look, I've got these advances coming in. I've got these savings. I can, if I quit work here part-time. So first of all, I went 2.5 days a week. So that was awful. I was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday morning, I was writing. Then Wednesday lunchtime, I'd have to put a shirt and tie on and go to work. It was fucking terrible. But then after 2.5 years of that, I said to my wife, just really need to make a go of this now. And if it all goes wrong, I can go and get another job. So I did, and she was very supportive and said, yeah, you got to go for it. So I sort of started work with like 6 or 8 months money in the bank, just in case nothing else came in. But then other stuff started coming in, and it's all, like I say, it's mostly, there's been a few difficult years, but mostly it's been okay. And I sort of judge making a success of it as I earn more now than I did when I was working for the man.
Yeah.
As a surveyor. So most years I earn more, some I don't, but then it balances out.
And how did you?
So I'm doing what I love as well, which wasn't what I was doing when I was surveying.
That's huge as well. You can't really put a price on happiness. I know that I went full time in 2019, and I'm yet to supersede what I was earning. And I'm about to take another big pay cut because I've been ghostwriting as well for 3 years, and I'm about to drop that to do some other things as well. But you can't really put a price on that happiness, on that freedom to be able to spend time doing the things that you want to do. And so during that time in which you did go to 2.5 days, was your creative production as you kind of expected it to be? Because sometimes when people kind of get that swell of time, they have all the intentions of going, I'm going to do more, but then not quite feeling it. Did you find that a challenge, or was that kind of perfect for you at that point?
So to start off with, I think the short answer is no, I didn't do much more than I thought I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So 2.5 days a week, I was writing quite a bit. And then when I went full time, I thought I'm going to be able to write twice as much as I do now. And obviously I didn't, because it just doesn't work like that. There's a limit there's a creative limit, I think. Not for everyone, but for me, if I'm in the saddle on a novel, I can do 2,000 words a day. And I'm really pleased with that. Some days I've done 5,000 or 6,000, but I'm not sure they're all 5,000 or 6,000 good words,
Yeah.
But when I actually went full time, my first day as a full time writer was writing the novelization of 30 Days of Night. So it was a great plan. It was like, this is my first day working for myself full time. Which was brilliant. So I spent 2 days writing, getting into the novel. And then my editor said, oh, we've got the shooting script and the beginning's different. So I had to bin those first 2 days' work. I basically lost them. It was 10,000 words, I think. I was just really enjoying it.
Oh, that's got to hurt.
It would hurt, but it's just something with tie-in stuff. It's just something that happens sometimes. It's not your baby really, and you just need to follow the cues. But yeah, that was my first 2 days. But I still, I guess I probably averaged 2 novels a year since I've started writing. Some years I'll write 3, some 1 with other stuff. But one thing I didn't do is slow down. I did think there was a risk of having more time, which meant you could, spend more time writing novels. But I don't think I could spend a year writing a novel now. I've written novels so quickly all through my career, partly through necessity, working at the time, and partly through, there's a fine balance between art and commerce. I talk about it with friends all the time. And it's, writing is an art, but I also do it for a living. So I have to balance the commerce side of it because I want to keep doing it for a living. So I couldn't spend a year writing a novel because it wouldn't be financially viable unless I had income from elsewhere. Most of the time.
That's really interesting because that's definitely something that's played on my mind for the last couple of years. Because I guess, if you start looking at art versus commerce, a lot of people would kind of use the phrase selling out and bringing that into the fold, which I don't agree with on any level at all. Yeah. How do you balance the need to obviously sell your books with the creative process? Are they sort of 2 separate things that you think about totally differently, or are they kind of all one beast in your head?
Yeah, so I've always been lucky enough to sell. I sell every book I write, and a lot of the time, if you're in a good relationship with a publisher, you'll sell a novel on proposal. So I always write what I want to write, and I'm lucky enough to sell it. But conversely, I sort of sometimes think if I tried something a bit different, maybe it would sell better. And I've tried that. I've written fantasy, thrillers, and they've all reached certain levels of success. But I'm not sure I've never had like a breakout novel that's exploded and gone viral and sells hundreds of thousands of copies. So me balancing art and commerce means I feel I'm in a fairly okay place really, because I write, everything I write is something I want to write, and it earns me enough money to move on to the next project. But there's never come an occasion where there's been a couple of reasonable paydays in my career with like movies and stuff like that, but there's never been a novel that lands and really takes off and makes me think, right, now I can change the way I work and just write a novel every 18 months because I'm earning those sort of advances. That doesn't happen to many people, I don't think. So you use the phrase selling out there. Some people say, oh, I've done a lot of tie-in fiction, and some people regard that as the poor relation to original fiction. But I've always loved the tie-in fiction I've done, and I've never done anything that I didn't want to do. I've been offered stuff and I thought, I don't fancy doing that, so I've turned it down. But stuff like Star Wars and Hellboy and my God, I've written 4 Alien novels. I fucking love Alien. As you can see, I've got my plush face hugger on my book just back there. I've got a little dude here, massive Alien fan. So So I've never done tie-in stuff that I've not really wanted to do. And tie-in stuff is a payday, like novelizing a movie script. You can do it in a month and the money's reasonable for what you do. So I wouldn't regard that as selling out. I regard it as being a working writer, which is how I regard myself. I'm not a bestseller. I've been in the bestseller charts, but strangely, both with books that are tie-ins. You know, my Star Wars novel was a bestseller. In the New York Times bestseller list, it wasn't #1. And I think Cabin in the Woods also, or maybe it was 30 Days. No, maybe it was 30 Days. One of those got in the charts. But you know, I'm a working writer, and I do regard it as work. It's a job. You know, I say to my wife, right, I'm going to work now. I don't say I'm just popping in the office, put my feet up and stare out the window, you know, although that's part of it.
Yeah. It is hard though, isn't it? Like, I mean, it's really working a creative muscle for a substantial amount of time per week to make the words come out on page, whether or not, like, you know, you're doing it as a living or whether you're trying to do it as like a hobbyist. I think a lot of people that I have in my life, friends and family, have no idea the energy expenditure that does come from writing. Yeah. And they see it as, you know, you just get to like tell stories for the day. It's like, well, you try and tell a story and you know, see how that goes for you.
Yeah, I always find it hard work. I find writing hard work, and it's a pleasure, but it's, you know, and I'm always looking forward to getting to my desk in the morning and starting, but I never find it really, really easy. I find it hard work. And I think that's just me, but also I think most friends I speak to who write say it should be hard work, really. If it's easy, it's probably not very good. There are some. I remember I saw Ian Banks Ian Banks is one of my favorite writers. He's one of the few people who's died that I felt personal loss for, even though I'd only met him once, really, really pissed at a bar. And I saw him interviewed once, and I can't remember. I think it was Beryl Bainbridge interviewing him, actually. And she said, so you must spend, you know, 9 or 10 months a year writing your novels because they're all so intricate. And he said, oh no, I spend spring, summer and autumn I spend with my friends driving around Scotland, drinking whiskey and having a great time. And then winter comes and I think, oh, I better write another novel. I thought, you lucky bastard, you know, you can spend 3 months writing those amazing novels, 3 or 4 months. I'm sure he was being a bit flippant, but you know. Yeah.
What does your typical weekly writing process look like?
It's pretty much 9 to 5, to be honest. Writing wise, I write during the day. I'll try and get to my desk by 9. Evenings often I'll do stuff like Zoom interviews or speak to my agent, and my agent's in New York, my film manager's in LA, so if I need to speak to them, that's always, you know, out of work time most of the time. But yeah, because even though it's 17 years since I worked, you know, in an office for a living, and that was flexi time, 9 to 5-ish. I still keep those hours. I'd love to be able to get up at 6 and start work. I know Ramsey Campbell is at his desk by 6 in the morning.
As well.
Are you? Right.
Yeah.
I just wish. I mean, I'd find it easier. My kids are both grown up now. My daughter's 24 and she's in uni. My boy's nearly 19 and he's just about to start uni. He's traveling at the moment. So it's just me and my wife in the house at the moment. So I'm trying to get up earlier, but it's just so easy just to lie in. I like my sleep. So yeah, it's sort of pretty much a normal work day. But I do say to my wife, I'm always working as well. If there's a phone call at 11, I'll come in and take it and do whatever needs doing, you know, because I regard it as work and a job. It's also, you know, a pleasure. I also love what I do. So
that helps.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And when it comes to your creating side of things, how you actually write the stories, has that changed much over the years in terms of the actual process of getting the story started and going down? And presume here that we'll talk about kind of your own stories as opposed to the tie-ins. But how does your writing process look in terms of getting that onto the page?
It hasn't changed massively. It changes book by book, but not to a huge amount. So often if I sell a book on a proposal, I'll write a few page proposal, maybe a sample chapter or 2. And if I sell a book like that, I'll very often put the proposal to one side and then just go and write the book without looking at it again. And that happens quite often. But I'm a pantser, not a planner. I don't spend weeks and weeks and weeks planning a novel. I'll let it percolate in my head for months probably, and then start taking notes and get to a stage where I think I'm ready to start writing. And then I sort of plan a couple of chapters ahead as I'm writing then. So I'll have a chapter on the screen, and at the end of everything I've written, at the end of the day, I'll make a load of notes, and those notes slowly expand into what the rest of the novel, the shape of the rest of the novel is going to be. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it's caused me problems. And I've occasionally thought to myself, if I planned a novel scene by scene, chapter by chapter, it might be a more interesting and enlightening way to work. But also, I think I'm afraid of telling the story before I've written it. So I think if you plan too much, you get to the stage where you've told yourself the story, and a lot of the pleasure of writing is telling yourself a story. That's why when I get to the end of writing a novel, I speed up, because I want to know what happens at the end.
We're very, very similar in that way.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. I think that's just the natural way of doing it, because we are, even though it takes us months to tell a story, we're still telling a story and finding our way through it. Some Last Storm, for instance, was quite a different process, because I wrote that longhand. We could talk about that later, maybe. That's the first and last novel I've written longhand. I won't say never again, but that was a really, really interesting experience. And I actually really honestly think it benefited the writing. But mostly few pages of notes which expand as I'm working.
Well, I mean, since we're there, and since I didn't know this was a thing, let's dig into that. Okay. So I know only a couple of people who have written sort of big novels longhand, especially sort of recent years. I know one of them is Josh Malerman's done a few of his longhand and then converted those over. I know Gaiman famously does a lot of longhand into text. What was the impetus to go in longhand with this most recent book, which for people listening on the podcast is officially out, and it would have come out last Tuesday?
Well, it's out tomorrow, actually, I think.
Well, so this goes live on Monday, the
of course,
11th.
Okay.
So
great. No,
Tuesday 5th. Go get your coffee.
Actually, Tuesday the 12th, I was informed today that it's actually out on the 5th.
Boom.
Yes. So there we go. A bit of confusion. So it was put back in the States to the 19th because of delivery problems, and I think the paper shortage has been causing people hassle. But the UK release date is the 5th of July. So the reason why I wrote it longhand is Rio Ewers, basically. Rio's a dear friend of mine and one of our best writers. He's a British Canadian. He's a really good mate, and he writes all his novels longhand. So he'll take a notebook and anything, any bit of paper, or he'll go and sit in a cafe or pub or sit at home and write his day's words, get back, type them up, and then the next day he'll do the same. So he just talked me into doing it. I thought it was really, I had a sort of romantic notion of having all these I ordered some really nice notebooks from the States, and I thought, I want really a Quillen. Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. Code and Quill notebook. Cost me a fortune to get it imported from the States. So I had all this notion of going to sit. I live in a nice part of South Wales, going to sit on the mountaintops with a flask of coffee and a notebook and a fountain pen. And then so I started, and then fucking COVID hit. So that was it. So I wrote the entirety of the novel longhand, sitting in the house. We got a fairly sizable, it's not sizable houses, 3-bed semi. I've got the office downstairs. We got a cabin in the garden, but my wife was working from home, and my daughter was finishing a degree from home. My son was doing his A-levels from home, so I just had to find a quiet spot to sit, and I wrote the whole thing longhand during COVID. So then had to type it up, and being a 3 or 4 finger typist, it took me ages. So it's the typing up more than anything that I think I waited till the end. I should have done what Rio does, which is write a couple of days and then transcribe and edit. But process wise, I honestly think it benefited the novel, because I'm a bad typist. When I'm writing a novel, I'm always going back correcting stuff. Yeah. And that not only does it, I think, disrupt the flow, it also means you're editing as you go. Whereas with The Last Storm, I didn't. I just splurged it out on the page, on the 1,000 pages, whatever it was. I've got a big pile of notebooks somewhere.
My God.
Yeah, and I think it helped. I think it gave the novel more impetus and more sort of velocity, I think, in some ways.
I like that. Be interesting when I get my copy through, reading that and seeing what that impact is.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine doing it myself. I'm one of those people that I have to type because my brain works very, very fast. And I have a fear that if I'm like writing with pen, that I've had it before where I tried to write a sentence and already like I'm 3 sentences ahead of where I'm writing.
Oh, right.
Did you find much of that at all, or was it kind of fairly?
Yeah, a little, but then so I'm also, as well as being not very, I've written all these novels, but mainly with these 3 fingers. But also my handwriting's terrible. So a lot of the time I was handwriting, you know, and jumping, you know, like you say, speeding up because I had ideas for the next couple of sentences. And then when I came to transcribe it, it was sometimes I had trouble. I was just got the gist.
Oh no!
trying to read what I'd written, and it was like, what did I mean here? What did I? It sort of worked out okay though. I think I'm, and the transcribing was one editorial process, and then once I transcribed it all, and then the proper work began. So I suppose it had one more round of edits in my books.
Must be nice to still experiment and still find new ways of bringing the story to life.
Yeah, and that's something I still try and do now with whatever I'm working on. Is I always take a step back and think, how am I going to approach this one? It's usually the same way because it's the way I'm used to doing it and the way that's worked in the past. But that was a interesting experiment. I'm working on a new novel now, which is well, in between other stuff, which is I'm just doing traditionally. I'm just typing in. I'm not quite sure how it's working yet. But also I'm working on different stuff at the moment, which means usually when I'm working on a novel, I'm just working on the novel and maybe a couple of side projects like occasional screenplay or something. But at the moment I'm actually working on a computer game at the moment, which is great fun.
Nice.
Really enjoying that. And I'm doing some audio dramas for Audible, which can't announce yet, but they're going to be quite exciting.
Well, looking forward to seeing those.
Yeah.
I kind of want to dig into a little bit about your publishing journey and specifically how you're getting the books published, because I know you've got Dreaming in Fire Press, which, you know, you've done some stuff where, from what it seems, you've independently published your things through. But at the same time, you obviously still do a lot of work with major publishers. How do you approach where a book should live, and how has that process changed over the last sort of 10, 20 years? Because I know that obviously the whole landscape of publishing has kind of rocked. Yeah,
it's changed a lot since, I feel really old now, but it's changed a lot since I've been in it, because, you know, the whole ebook thing exploded. And then at the time then it was, oh my God, books are dead, or everything's going to be ebooks from now on. And that's leveled out. And physical books are more popular than they've been for a long time, I think, at the moment. Dreaming in Fire is just a little side project that I put some old books out under, really, as ebooks. I just thought it'd be best to try and, you know, this books I'd had the rights back before that nobody really wanted to publish again. Novellas that I had owned the rights to, so I just thought I'd do it as a bit of a little project. And then the only original book I've done through there is the fitness book. You know, run, walk, crawl, getting fit in my 40s. And that was something else I finished during lockdown. I'd started, so I started sort of getting fitter about 10 or 12 years ago and doing runs, and then got into biking, and then progressed from 5Ks to Ironman, and just went a bit silly. But I still love doing shit like that. You know, it just keeps me sane. And I spend the bulk of my day at my desk, which is now a standing desk. I'm actually sitting at it, but I bought myself a standing desk. That's why the old background. It's great. I love it.
Yeah.
But run, walk, crawl, I just thought I, you know, need to write about what I'm doing, and it just turned into a real fun project that didn't hurt at all when I was writing it. Whereas what I was writing about all hurt, you know, all these marathons and stuff. And that's the only thing I've self-published, the only original thing I've self-published. All the other stuff I publish has all been traditional through mainstream publishers. And that, like I said before, I started with indie press when I was starting out. I still work with the indie press now. I've had a couple of books out through PS Publishing recently, because I love working with them. And certain books, like a novella, I did a novella called Without Walls in collaboration with Danielle Serra, the Sardinian artist, brilliant artist. And it's a sort of project that mainstream publishers just don't really know what to do with. You know, oh, we like this, but it's It's only 12,000 words long and heavily illustrated. So it ended up with a small press, with an indie press PS, which is, and the book just looks beautiful. But novel-wise, I've always been lucky enough to publish anything I've written, pretty much. And a lot of the time, that's because you're already in a relationship with a publisher. Like Titan and I have done, I think that must have done 15 books together now, including all the tie-in stuff.
Yeah.
So it's always been traditional. That's not to say I've not thought about doing self-publishing. The person who's made a massive success of that is Adam Neville in our sort of genre. Adam exclusively self-publishes now, and he's done a brilliant job at it. But I'm not sure I've got the focus or the knowledge to be able to do that successfully, and take the time it would take to do it.
Yeah, it's a lot of different plates to spin and mechanisms to get working. And but so curiosity partly for myself, but also for a lot of people I know who'll be listening, who because what I find a lot in the circles that I run in is very, very self-published heavy, and there's a lot of emphasis on, make the most of selling your own books, build your own audience, all that kind of thing. What would you say to someone in 2022 who would like to go traditionally published? What would be the sort of best method of approaching that? Because obviously we know it's not a guaranteed thing to get, but to actually try and get into the traditionally published arena.
Get an agent is definitely the first thing I'd say. Some publishers do still entertain non-agented manuscripts, and some of them do still publish them and pull them off the slush pile, but I think it's a very small percentage. So agent is like a first quality control mechanism as far as the publishers are concerned, and a good agent is worth their weight in gold. I've got an amazing agent who's a good friend, and I couldn't do what I'm doing without him, absolutely without a doubt. Howard Morheim in New York, amazing guy. And that's also a big step, because sometimes it takes a long time to get an agent. Agents work for you, but also they pick and choose who they work for. If you see what I mean. They don't just take on anyone. They take on people who they think they can sell, and people whose work they think they can sell. So it's got to be a certain standard before an agent will take you on. And then once you get a good agent, once you get an agent who hopefully is good, then they'll have relationships with all the mainstream publishers and editors, and they know people. So they'll read your stuff and think, right, this one might be suitable for Galance, for instance, and work on their relationships. But an agent is definitely worth their weight in gold. I've tended to jump from publisher to publisher, and that's a commercial thing. Like when I wrote my thrillers, The Hunt and The Family Man, for Avon, they didn't sell brilliantly, so I didn't have another deal with them. And that's just part of being a working writer. I don't know many writers. I know a few, but not many who stick with the same publisher all the time. A lot of the time it's sign up with a new publisher, exciting deal, yay, this is going to sell millions. Oh, it doesn't. Move on to other publishers. So in that way, I've worked with a lot of the big publishers, and have enjoyed good relationships with virtually all of them, to be honest. It's just the nature of the beast, really, sometimes.
Yeah. And so one of the questions that I know that people will be waiting for me to ask, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, the tie-ins.
Yeah.
So how did all of that come about? How did you get involved in working with these massive properties?
So the first, trying to think, I think the first one I did was, I think it was a Hellboy novel for Chris Golden. No, I've got a hazy memory at best, but that was either that one was the first one, or The Cabin in the Woods. If it was Cabin in the Woods, it was because I'd signed up with Titan for The Silence, my novel, and Colebrook, which they published in America, but not here. So basically the tie-in stuff, once you sort of show that you've got a bit of that you can deliver on time and deliver, books that people think are okay, generally, editors are more likely to offer you tie-in work, because it's almost always real tight deadlines. It's like, can you novelize this movie for us in 6 weeks? Yeah, okay. And then as long as you got the time, the pay is usually, it's not order kidney-shaped swimming pool, subterranean James Bond, but it's usually okay. You know, it's a bread and butter work sometimes, and great fun to do. And then once you've done a couple of tie-ins, even if it's for different publishers, and you become known as a tie-in person, people tend to come back to you sometimes. It's not something that I want to do loads and loads, and I have done quite a bit of it. I haven't done much lately. I'm enjoying working on my own stuff, and you know, I think it's good to do a few and be known as reliable, but I wouldn't just want to just write tie-ins all the time. I've had fun doing them, and I've had amazing fun doing them, like Star Wars. I mean, that was amazing. My agent phoned me about something else. He said, "Oh, by the way, do you want to do Star Wars? I've just had a call." I said, "Yes." Yeah, bloody right. And Alien as well. The Alien projects were just amazing with Titan. They were a labor of love, absolutely, without a doubt. Like I said earlier, I've not done stuff that I've not done stuff that I thought, oh, I don't really want to do this. I've enjoyed everything I've done.
Yeah.
So it's sort of getting a bit of a not reputation, but getting once editors know you're fairly reliable at delivering stuff on time and that isn't crap, then they're more likely to come to you. And with Titan, certainly, you know, I've done as many, probably done more of my own novels with Titan as I have tie-ins. So and once you get working with an editor, you know, they know that you're okay to work with most of the time.
And how much flexibility do you have in the sense of, obviously it's other people's intellectual property, so I'm assuming obviously there are boundaries, there are things, and I also assume that doing something like a Star Wars story is going to be a bit different to a film novelization like Cabin in the Woods. How do the different kind of stories work in terms of actually getting the story down, and how much creativity you have in that process?
Well, so novelizations, to start with, the creativity is getting inside the characters' heads, which you can't do in the movie. You know, the movies, you can see it and hear it, but you can't internalize anything.
Yeah.
So novelizations for me, really expanding on the characterization stuff. I think I've done 3 novelizations now, and it's always pretty much, you can't cut anything out, but you can add stuff. So when I did 30 Days of Night, I finished it and delivered it to my editor, and he, "Oh, I love it. And he came back 2 days later, he said, "Oh, you changed some of the dialogue." And I said, "Yeah, I thought it wasn't very good, so I changed some of it." He said, "It's got to go back in." So you can add stuff.
Yeah.
Like 3 Days of Night, I added a scene where a polar bear walked into Barrow, and the vampires toyed with it like a cat with a mouse, and then they killed it, which would have been great in the movie. But so original tie-in stuff like Star Wars, for instance. Star Wars is a good example because it's such an entrenched universe. It's a beloved universe, you know, got dedicated fans. When it was announced I was doing a Star Wars novel, I had an email from somebody. "Oh my God, are you going to use the EZ-141 droid?" And I don't know what the fuck you're on about. And I sort of replied, said, "Yeah, I might do. I'm not sure yet. See what the story takes me." Star Wars, my novel was the earliest in the timeline, so I was quite relieved I didn't have to read 150 Star Wars novels to get up to where mine was placed. And I had great freedom coming up with a story. It took a while to pin down the sort of location and theme of the story, because anything I mentioned, it was all within a Dawn of the Jedi universe, which was basically one big star system, Titan star system. Anything I pointed out in the comics, I said, "Oh, I'd love to write a story about that." If no, you can't do that, we're going to use that in the future. So in the end, I just made up my own. I think I made up a couple of my own planets, my own characters, my own stories set in the sort of same time zone. So they were Force swords instead of lightsabers, for instance.
Yeah.
And then I had great freedom. The editing process was really painless, to be honest. There were very few notes came back saying you can't do this. One of the interesting ones was, "Oh, you've used cuss words," and they were like, I think you used the word bastard in there a couple of times and shit. And they were like, and my editor was, "Oh, it's in context, so I'll leave it in." And a few reviews mentioned that I used cuss words in a Star Wars novel, and they didn't. But then I was asked to write it because of the fantasy I'd done, the sword and sorcery stuff. Dusk and Dawn and Fallen and the Island, which isn't really sword and sorcery, but that's how some people saw it. And they wanted this novel to feel more like a sword and sorcery story set in space than a sort of action sci-fi story set in space.
Yeah.
So that also shows how, you know, you write a certain type of book that can lead you to writing other stuff. Like I never for a minute thought if I write some dark fantasy novels, I might work on Star Wars one day. And that's just how it worked out. It was a nice, you know, nice surprise.
Yeah. It's interesting as well that you brought up about, you know, almost being typecast, or like the danger of being typecast as that kind of writer. I'd never really kind of imagined that in the writing world. You obviously like imagine it as like an actor or, you know, in the film world, but I never saw that crossing over into writers with novels and things.
It does for some. I don't. People do talk about all the tie-in stuff I've done, but then I've also done a lot of my own stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the fact I've done different stuff, like I've written a lot of horror novels that are fairly different. I've written a zombie apocalypse novel, and then compare that to something like The Silence or Relics. Relics was almost a mythological novel. But then I've also done dark fantasy and crime and thrillers. So I think that there is a risk of getting typecast. That's why, you know, I wouldn't want to do 2 tie-in novels a year, because then you are known more for your tie-in stuff. But the upside of that is that, you know, I think my Star Wars novel, is biggest selling novel I've ever done, is 70 or 80,000 copies or 100,000. And that's all to people who've never heard of me. And if even, you know, 2 or 3% of those people like the book enough to go looking for Tim Lebbon novels, then it's beneficial. And the same with the Star Alien stuff, and any tie-in. I think any tie-in project you do, you're hopefully opening yourself up to new readers. I'm not sure what the crossover is. I don't think it's massive, because if all those Star Wars readers started buying my own novels, then I would be a bestseller. But
yeah,
but there must be a small amount who enjoy the story enough to buy your original stuff. That's sometimes the hope as well.
And how would you describe your latest project, The Last Storm, in terms of the story and, you know, what you're hoping to achieve with that book?
Well, it's a climate, I think my publisher calls it a climate change horror thriller, which is a bit of a mouthful, but I suppose it is.
Find that in the metadata.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that's all over Amazon. Sort of a natural follow-on to Eden, really, which was a climate change thriller as well. It's very different to Eden, because I mean, I've had a couple of people ask me, is it set in the same world? And my answer is, it could be, because I hadn't really thought while I was writing, but it could very easily be set in the same universe. There's no real story crossover. Whereas Eden started with a group of people who were very close, and they were a good team, and they had to confront trouble from the outside. The Last Storm is more, there's a real sort of family drama in there. So it starts with a estranged family, and stories about them having to come back together to stop something terrible happening. And it's set against the sort of mythic, epic North American landscape in the near future, which is being devastated by famine and drought. So the whole swathe of mid-America is called the desert now, because very little grows there. But it also feels sort of contemporary in some ways, in that even though there's been this climate disaster, people are still watching movies and reading books and scrolling their social media, and people are getting on with it. So it's a terrible place to live, but they're also getting on with it. But there's also a cosmic horror element to it, because my main characters are rainmakers. They're people who can bring rain through arcane means, which is described in the book. And they're tapping into some other sort of reality to bring this rain. And that starts bringing stuff other than rain down, like deadly creatures. So it's sort of it's a chase novel. Lots of my friend Sarah Pinborough said, everything you write is a chase novel. And it's sort of really. I just love chase novels. So it's a race against time across the sort of Dust Bowl type landscape of, you know, epic landscape of North America, with the sort of cosmic horror tinges, especially towards the end.
I'm excited to read it.
It's great. Yeah, I'm really pleased with it. Really pleased with it. And Titan have done, they always do great covers.
It's a beautiful cover.
So
and my son is particularly into scorpions at the minute. So when my copy comes
cool.
through, I'm sure he'll love that.
There are some nasty scorpions in there. Yeah.
Yeah. And might I also add, so I finished reading Eden last week. Absolutely fantastic. Loved it from start to finish.
Thank you.
It also has one of the most entertaining deaths. And I won't say what it is, obviously, for people in case they want to read it. But the moment towards the end involving kind of like a descent from a crane.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one. Yeah.
I read that and had one of those moments where I was like, I've never seen this in a book before. And that was fantastic. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolute pleasure.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic book. Is climate change a thing that's on your mind? Is that something you're trying to express through your books?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, I've always loved nature. I'm a country boy, lived in the city for a while, but my wife and I moved to our village 25 years ago, and we both say we'd never live in a city again. We just love where we live. So I'm a nature lover, and then you can't be a nature lover and not be worried about what's happening to the world. So it's always been present in my writing, I think. Even if it's just location wise, a lot of my writing's rural rather than urban. But lately it's become more of a very obvious facet to what I'm writing about. Even the silence was a sort of could have been, a climate change, not climate change, but it was about us probing where we shouldn't in the world, that sort of thing. Also, my daughter's doing a master's degree in climate change and environmental policy, so I get to read a lot of her essays, and some of them go way above me, but
imagine that's pretty terrifying.
It can be.
Yeah,
it can be. But I also really try and keep an element of optimism. I'm not known for my humor in my books, but I try and keep. And the optimism in The Last Storm is, as I said just now, people are getting on with it. It's a world that's where the tipping point has come and gone, and it's a world in decline, but people are still trying to farm and scrape a living and look after each other. And I think that's how we got to face it. We got to adapt and survive, rather than just let ourselves be overwhelmed by everything.
On that cheery note, so we are coming up to the end of the podcast, but I do have two more questions for you. One of them which I ask every guest every week, and one of them which is a surprise question from last week's guest. So the first question is, why do you, Tim Lebbon, write?
Why do I write? My usual answer is it's the way my mum put my hat on, and that's the saying my nan had. I don't think I could not write, but I also don't analyze the reason why I do it. I just love it so much. I love telling stories, and it's just become the thing that I do. I do it for a living, but I'd write if I wasn't making money at it as well.
I love it. And a question from last week's guest: if you could write for any existing IP that you haven't yet, what would it be and why? Oh,
that's an interesting one. Because I've thought about this sometimes, and it's a difficult one. Not really sure. So I've always I love Vikings. It's one of my favorite TV series, and I've never written a historical novel. So I think I'd probably like to write a Vikings novel. Nice. The amount of research involved in that would be staggering, I'm sure.
Off-putting for me.
That's
why I write like far off concepts, so I don't have to research.
I don't do an awful lot of research. But my friend Mark Morris, for instance, wrote a Spartacus novel, and he found the language and the research pretty heavy going on that. I'm a big Vikings fan. I also love The Shield, the TV series The Shield from 10, 12 years ago, one of my favorite TV series. I'd quite like to write a Shield novel, but that's LA crime. And again, I don't know anything about cops and procedure. So I think I've been lucky enough to, I've written Alien and Star Wars and Firefly. I've been lucky enough to write a lot of the stuff I love, which is great.
Perfect.
Vikings. That's it. That's the roundabout way of saying Vikings.
I love it. Awesome. So final question, where can my listeners find out all about yourself and all that you're working on?
My website's timlebbon.net, and I'm on Facebook and Twitter, and I'm just trying to learn how to use Instagram. I'm not a Luddite, but it takes me a while to get into working out how these things work. So I am on Instagram as well. So come and friend me and be gentle if I on there.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Tim. Really, really appreciate it.
Cheers, Dan. I had a really good fun. Thank you.
So there it is. That was the interview with Tim Lebbon. Sam, what did you make of that?
That guy has had like an insane career.
Mm-hmm.
Like insane.
Yes.
I just think to be trusted with like such huge franchises, Star Wars, I mean Firefly.
Oh.
In my mind, Firefly like trumps Star Wars, but I know that I could cause like a third world war by stating that. So, and you know, obviously Alien and the other Hellboy and stuff that he was talking about, like that's insane. The fact that he's traditionally published was nice to get kind of the other side of the coin, because like you say in the interview, obviously a lot of the circles that you run in, that we run in, it's kind of huge indie, but that doesn't mean that people aren't interested in trad publishing. I know, for example, you know, I would never be like against being traditionally published, but the way, if I did it, I'd want to like have a name for myself first and then kind of go in that way. But yeah, so it was just really interesting to kind of hear him talk about that world. So, you know, like getting an agent and then almost kind of like cycling through the different publishing houses.
Yes.
But that being kind of de rigueur, is that how you say it? Like, you know, just that's kind of how it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, he just seemed like a really like chill, down to earth dude. Yeah, it was good listening.
Yeah, he is a lovely guy. I don't know if he mentioned it in that interview directly, but I think it might have been when we were talking beforehand. But he had just come off of a weekend of doing an Ironman, so he was also quite tired.
God,
I know, ridiculously impressive, and definitely like now at the point where I'm like, okay, how do I train for an Ironman, because I'm not in any way competitive. But
just
like,
Eddie Izzard it.
Yeah. Oh
no
my
training,
God, I don't understand that. Do not get it. Do not get it.
That's called knowing what your why is, Dan.
Like even during the pandemic,
you would understand that.
I know, but during the pandemic, like I was listening to him, and forgive me, I don't know his pronouns. Him,
Eddie Izzard.
I believe so. If I get it wrong, I apologize 1,000 times.
I believe it's he, him.
I believe so.
I haven't seen for a while, so yes.
Yeah. So yeah, he was doing a string of interviews during the pandemic because he was doing his marathons, because he's the 43 marathons in 44 days guy or whatever it was. Ridiculous. And he was just on interviews just while on the treadmill. And he was basically doing the marathons and he was bored. So he got his agent to go like book me on interviews, and they were like talking to him and he's like, yeah, I'm just and then I've been doing this with my career and it's all this, and it's like, it's not even that breathless, but it was incredible. So yeah, like, how did we get onto that? Running, Ironman, all that kind of thing. But yeah, so Tim, he's someone who I've kind of chatted a couple of times to, oddly, over the last however many years I've been indie publishing. Lovely guy, always around on like the different groups and things, just really interactive and things. And when I did meet him at ChillerCon, it was literally because he was wearing a Frank Turner t-shirt, and I'm, as I say, a big Frank Turner fan. And I didn't even realize it was him because I'd not like met him in person, and I forgot what he looked like. And just that surprise of we stood for about 20 minutes, had a drink, and just, you know, chatted about Frank Turner and the fact that he's written a book with Frank Turner, which hurts my heart, but also I'm so like excited for him. And you're right, like to see the other side of the coin is like see writers that are, you know, still making it traditionally published. You know, because I mean, there's no lack of them, but there is a very skewed slant on. I think a lot of the argument sometimes comes down to either or, like self-publishing or traditional. And I think the argument needs to be, how does it work for you? Like, what is the direction for this particular book that you're working on? Because you know, I've spoken on previous podcasts about the fact that self-publish is a choice. You cannot choose to be traditionally published, you can choose to pursue it. Which I think is just like, I think it was Rachel Herron I heard that from, and that just blew my mind, but it makes total sense.
It's not in your control, is it? Like it's completely out of your control. Yeah,
and like speaking to Tim, and then like being at ChillerCon and seeing other traditionally published authors, there is a part of me at the minute, like, I'm working some stuff that I'm like, I think I'm going to ship that out to see if it gets anything first. If it doesn't, I'll self-publish it. Like it's exploring your options and being deliberate about what you choose to do with your books.
Yes.
That's the key. Like, don't feel like you're trapped into one way or another because of X reasons. Like, there's still a place. There's still a place to, you know, traditional. You can obviously reach markets that you've unable to reach by yourself. You have the power of like a big house behind yourself. There is an area of an aura of gravitas in that, you know, you've been accepted by a traditionally published house. So there's that like validation that comes with it. And then conversely, self-publishing, like build an audience yourself, own what it is that you do. You know, there's no limit to what you can do, what you can put out. It's all your own, you can kind of control. But like some people like Tim don't necessarily want to understand or like, and I'm not like putting words in his mouth, but like there are authors that don't want to do everything or for business. They want to write, and you know that can happen. It's just wherever it sits best for you.
Yeah, and I think there's such pros and cons on both sides, really. And like you say, I think it is just about knowing who you are, like right now, because, you know, obviously we change and evolve and adapt. And it's about knowing what your project is. And, you know, would it best suit indie or traditional? Because there is, you know, obviously both, you can publish anything. I mean, if you get accepted, obviously with traditional, you can relatively publish anything. But I think there are, reader-wise, there are definitely places that people go for certain types and genres of books. So yeah, I think it is just about knowing yourself, knowing what you're working on, and kind of making that decision project by project. But yeah, like we were saying, it's really interesting to just hear the perspective of someone that is so, the word that's coming to my brain is entrenched, but that has negative connotations, and I don't mean it that way, in the traditional space, because, you know, we very rarely hear from that side of things. And yeah, I think it was very valuable and also just like enjoyable to listen to. He seems like just a really nice dude.
Yeah, I want to go for a beer with him. Tim, if you're listening, I know where you live. I'm coming for you. Fantastic. So that brings us around to the end. Next week we have on the show, our very own, is it? I need to double check this. There we go.
So who do we have on the show next week, Dan?
All my notes are skewed because it's been a hell of a week. Next week we have the incredible, one of our own, Meg Jolly, on the podcast. Speaking of Meg at the beginning of this episode, so that's gonna be a fun one. We're going to talk about septiles. We're going to talk about walking to different genres. We're going to talk about all the things that goblins. Probably not crotch goblins. Maybe we'll see where it goes. But yeah, Meg is a best-selling author of fantasy. She's a best-selling author of British crime, and she's just an incredible, very, very informed, intelligent person. And I'm very much looking forward to having the chance to sit down with her. Yeah, she's a best-selling woman of my heart as well. How sweet. Beautiful. Well, we'll wrap up by saying a massive thank you to you, the listeners, for tuning in. We appreciate you and the time you choose to spend with us each week. And as always, if you're looking to level up your writing and activate your author career, head on over to activatedauthors.com to find out all about our community, our resources, and everything else that we've got going on. One more time from myself and from Sam, goodbye, and we will see you next week. Goodbye. We appreciate you.
Activate your energy.